So a couple months ago, I made a post on my Instagram about how free market competition is generally good, but it doesn't work for agriculture in India. And a lot of people reached out asking for clarification, so I did more research. There's a lot of confusion out there on how these new three farm bills in India are impacting and devastating agriculture. Firstly, it's really important to understand how the current system works. So currently, if you're a farmer in India, large or small scale, you grow your own crops, you pay for the cost out of your pocket, and then you take them to a auction market to sell them, which is called a mandi, also known as APMC mandi. And this APMC mandi system was established by the Indian government back in the 60s to actually protect farmers against corporate exploitation and to ensure price fairness for their crops. The first model was actually introduced by the British under the British rule, and after India gains its independence, that's when it was actually formally enacted and passed. There's about 7,000 mandis in India, and farmers rely on them to sell their crops and to make sure they get good prices. And these new farm bills are essentially abolishing the mandi system. They don't do it directly, they do it indirectly. And the way they do it is they allow corporations to come in and set up marketplaces to buy and sell crops. So these marketplaces will initially offer great prices and fade the need for the mandi system. So once the need is gone, the mandi system will slowly be faded out and be eliminated. Once this is done, the corporations can then lower their prices that they're offering to the farmers, get farmers to get into contracts that they don't understand. So the large farmers might be able to negotiate price and terms for these contracts, but the majority of the farmers are small farmers in India. They own less than 3 acres of land. So they're not going to have the legal resources, the capital to actually have lawyers review these contracts and help them understand that they're not going to be harmed in the future if they breach these contracts. So the corporations will be able to take the farmer's land if the farmer doesn't meet the requirements or the terms of the contract. So essentially, the corporations will slowly take farmers' land. And this is a huge problem. And this is why farmers are willing to sacrifice their life right now in India by marching to Delhi. 58% of the Indian population depends on farming as a source of income. That's over 700 million people. Let that sink in for a second. That's twice the US population. And they need income, basic income to survive. You need income to pay for medicine. And that is at risk right now for these people. Millions of people can potentially die from these bills being passed and being enacted. So why would India pass these bills that would cause mass death or poverty? The short answer is greed and corruption. So you have to understand the opportunity the Indian government has here. By allowing corporations to come in and own a majority of the land in India, India can become a huge exporter of vegetables and food. Today, there are about 146 million farms in India, and India only exports $17 billion worth of food and vegetables every year. In contrast, in the US, there's only 2 million farms, and the US exports $135 billion worth of food and vegetables every year. That's 70 times less amount of farms, but almost 8 times the amount of value in terms of exports. So how is this possible? So in the US, 3% of all farms are controlling almost 50% of all production and value creation. So there's a concept in economics called economies of scale. So these farms are able to take advantage of economies of scale because they are making a lot more money. They can invest in the best equipment and the best technology and make farming more efficient. And they're able to get more crop produced within the same amount of time that a small scale farmer might be able to. So India realizes this opportunity. And the only way to do it, other than stealing people's land, is to pass bills that make it look like they're beneficial for the economy, and have private corporations come in and slowly buy up people's land. Not even buy, take people's land. And this is a huge problem. Farming is a business at the end of the day. As much as, I come from a Punjabi Sikh family and my grandparents and my parents love their land. I love my land back in India. And, we don't really think about it like that, but it's a business at the end of the day, right? So you have costs up front. So you invest in equipment and crops and fertilizers and pesticides, and then you take your produce and you go sell it for a profit, hopefully. So it's one of the largest small businesses in India. So in the US, when COVID hit, the US pumped trillions of dollars into the economy to save the small businesses. In that same time period, India passed these 3 farm bills, which are essentially death sentences for these small businesses. And it's crazy to think that, but in that same time period, they're forcing people that are already struggling. Farming is not a very lucrative business in India right now, and they're forcing them to basically accept these terms and eventually lose their land. So the main argument by Modi supporters is that these bills are somehow great for farmers because they'll allow them to sell their crops anywhere in the country for any price to anybody. And this is actually already possible. There was an amendment to the APMC Acts in 2003 that allowed for this. The reason farmers don't do it is because it doesn't make sense. The cost of transporting your crops to a different state or even anywhere outside of your city is huge. And if there's no price assurance, there's a huge risk of transporting crops somewhere and then not getting that price, and now you're at a huge loss as a farmer, as a small scale farmer. And they're not educated enough to be able to get into complex contracts, so these people are obligated to buy from them. So they're really reliant on this mandi system. What needs to happen is these bills need to get reverted. If they don't get reverted, India could head into a dark age where you have mass poverty, majority of the population doesn't have basic income, which is what they rely on today from farming. So the government needs to revert these bills before they can even be discussed in terms of amendments or changes. Because it's the job of the government to support the people even if they're losing money. And I understand India's losing a lot of money supporting farmers right now. But in the US, if you make less than a certain amount of income, you actually get free healthcare and free health insurance. So the Indian government needs to actually do more. They need to not only revert these bills, they need to pass new bills that will protect farmers and ensure minimum price support and also subsidies for farming. because most of the farmers are very poor. You know, they own less than 3 acres of land. And these bills are actually inevitable. When you have such a big opportunity for a government to increase its revenue and private companies to increase their revenue, you're going to eventually get these bills in the future again. And we need to get the farmers in India prepared. We need to get them educated. And we need the government to pass bills to protect the small-scale farmers. The large-scale farmers will be fine if these bills are passed. But it's the small-scale farmers, the majority of the farmers in India, the majority of the population of India, that's going to be impacted by this. So more directly, what you can do to support today is donate to organizations like Khalsa Aid. I encourage you to do your own research. If you find better organizations, donate there. Continue to do marches and rallies all over the world, because this is the only way we might get media attention and global media attention. And write to your local and federal governments to be able to pursue them and push them to talk about the issue and encourage the Indian government to listen to these farmers, because the Indian government doesn't care about these farmers or their citizens. They never have. They do care about their stance on issues like this at a global scale, and their diplomatic relationships with countries like the US and Canada and the UK and other countries around the world. So let's continue fighting, let's continue pushing here, because this is actually a really big problem than most people realize. And literally millions of people are going to die. And we have to be their voice, because they don't have the resources to get out here and get in front of, you know, governments and countries and lawmakers to be able to push the Indian government to do things. All they can do is rally and protest, and they're doing that, but the Indian government is trying to silence them. So we can't be silenced. We need to continue supporting and pushing these farmers to continue rallying, and also pushing other governments around the world to push India to actually revert these bills.